Thanks, Dana. So next I'm going to talk about the state preset map, which is a different product from the previous that have been discussed in that it's not a forecast, but actually looks back at the last few days and gives an overview of the recent precipitation and flooding conditions. It's still a blog style post and it's published at noon each day, which is just an hour after the other products to allow for any late reports that may come in. There are two main components of the SPM that I'm going to talk about. First of which is quantitative precipitation estimates, or QPE. Um, here we go. So we get our QPE from a subconsultant DTN, and their product is called MetStorm Live. And while we've used a version of this product for a number of seasons, this is the first year we're actually getting their next generation product. The biggest change, we're now receiving 1 hour quantitative precipitation estimates for every single hour in a day, so 24 grids a day, um, which includes a good, better, and best estimate run for each hour, and these are available shortly after the hour. It's still a 1 square kilometer grid cell resolution, which is higher resolution than some of the QPE products from the federal government, like NOAA Stage 2, and it's comparable to the MRMS product from NSSL. The MetStorm Live product ingests several sources of precipitation data, including gauge data from a network of over 24,000 rain gauges in real time, dual polarization radar, both precipitation estimates and reflectivity, and then satellite estimates of precipitation and climatology. And so this map here on the right is an example of the 24-hour QPE a couple days ago on the 28th. With those hourly grids that we're getting, we can then create our own 24, 48, 72 hour sums, as well as 1, 2, and 6 hour maximum precipitation for the current day. Beforehand, we were receiving these grids themselves without directly computing them for any day. Any bias correction or adjustments to the grids based on gauge data also then needs to be done on our end. And this development is going on right now within Dewberry. And so those tools for optimizing this QPE product are still in the works for this season. So that's the QPE data. We also do a deep dive into a ton of rain gauge data, rain and stream flow gauge data. And that makes the second component of the SPM. Here's a list of some of the gauge networks we rely on heavily, first of which is the Community Collaborative Rain, Hail, and Snow Network, or COCORAS, which I know Dana and Dima had alluded to earlier as being particularly helpful for our products. These are daily reports of precipitation, typically at about 7 a.m. From citizen scientists all over the state and country, really. This map here on the left shows precipitation on June 28th. And so you can see the distribution of gauges across the state. Obviously, in the more urban metro areas, we've got higher density, but there are still a lot of citizens reporting their precipitation in rural portions of the state as well, which is particularly helpful. We also look at any available municipal or utility networks. The Mile High Flood District has a great network across the metro area, and Fort Collins has their own network that includes town and further west into the Poudre Canyon. MesoWest is another great resource that we use for gauge data, specifically National Weather Service and RAWS gauges, which tend to be sub-daily, so hourly or even sub-hourly precipitation gauges. If we're really lucky, we may have a storm that, goes just directly over a gauge, and we're able to then pinpoint that exact timing and magnitude of the precipitation from that extensive network of gauges. SNOTEL or snow telemetry stations are particularly helpful at the beginning and ends of each season when we are expecting precipitation to be frozen. SNOTEL stations are also in very remote rural areas, so it helps provide needed information where we don't always have other accessible gauges. That's a lot of precipitation gauges, but we also look at stream flow. We relied largely on the USGS National Water Dashboard, which is shown on the right. But we also look at the AHAPS, that's Advanced Hydrologic Precipitation. Can't remember what the S is, but gauges all across the state as well. And then the Department of Water Resources has some great options for looking at even smaller, less, river gauges, but more like culverts and diversions as well. So that's all great, but sometimes we're just completely unable to source any from these official networks. So we'll turn to personal weather stations. These are typically automated stations that people will have in their backyards. And then that data is automatically submitted to sites like Weather Underground. The reason those ones aren't official, there's no real QC process that goes into them compared to the other major networks. Um, in addition to just the gauge data, which really just reports magnitude, we look at storm and flood reports. The Iowa State Environmental Mesonet has a great archive of severe weather reports along with National Weather Service issued warnings, watches, and advisories. Um, so every day we'll look at the previous day's storm reports. We'll go through the language of any of the warnings that were issued to understand what forecasters were thinking when they issued that and what their main concerns for. We'll also parse through storm reports, which can include anything from high winds, large hail, tornadoes, lightning strikes, dust, storms, fog, and then of course heavy rain as well. This is an example on the slide of the archive from July 14th and 15th, 2021. So if you remember back, this was a noted day of a debris flow on the Grizzly Creek scar, which prompted closures of I-70. Well, it closed I-70, there was a debris flow. So for this particular day, there were 6 flash flood warnings or flood advisories issued between both Boulder, Grand Junction, Pueblo Weather Forecast Office, along with 1 severe thunderstorm warning. And 1 heavy rain report where a train spotter reported up to 0.78 inches of rain. And then we can see that CDOT report of mud across I-70 at mile marker 128 there. Another tool in our search to understand conditions across the previous few days is social media. So we'll review the latest posts on the COWX hashtag. These are particularly helpful in verifying reports when people will, upload a picture of hail in their front yard that accumulated enough to look like snow or heavy rain causing runoff down their streets. CDOT and county pages also are on social media are helpful, similar to how I discussed in the fire burn forecast. We use that information for the state preset map as well. And then, of course, the Weather Service offices have their own pages that are helpful in verifying reports. I especially like to use these on days when the weather may not be particularly eventful in terms of precipitation, but they're helpful for verifying things like record-setting high temperatures. For example, a couple weeks ago on June 13th, a couple records were set in Pueblo and Colorado Springs that the Pueblo Weather Service office verified. And then lastly, I really want to hype up our own reporting page. This is the Report a Flood tool, which is found on the Flood Threat Bulletin website. And with this tool, users can reach us directly to inform of any flooding they have may seen. Users are just asked to give us the date and time, location, and type of flooding that they're seeing, that type being riverine versus heavy rainfall. And they can also input any additional hazards, comments, or links to additional information. So for example, we had a handful of reports last season, including someone sharing some great video they took and uploaded to YouTube of flooding along Cherry Creek in Denver last year. If you provide your contact information in this, we can also reach out to you for more information. And then so I just really want to emphasize that this tool is underutilized, but I want to make everyone on this call aware of it and understand its usefulness to us in getting these flood reports out there, verifying large events, and generally contributing to the success of our flood threat bulletin projects. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break now for a discussion. If we have any questions in the chat.
Thanks, Alyssa. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. I think we have kind of are resolving them kind of on the fly. But I'd say, Kaylee, thank you for that question. I think the our Report a Flood tool definitely takes care of that, and it's a really great way again to really it notifies directly of any kind of hazard as it relates to heavy rainfall and riverine flooding. Let's see. I think Dima, you addressed Bruce's question and comment, and then let's see. on to, was there anything else that folks wanted to bring up?
Hey, David, do you think we could go back and do those 2 case studies that we missed? Should probably take a couple of minutes, and it looks like we have a request to do the North American monsoon case study, which I think is the September 1st one.
Okay, yeah, we've got about 10 minutes left. I know that following this section, we were going to be rolling right into, let's see, let me get to where we're spot.
We were going to do Streamflow Tracker, and then if we have time, just a few slides on the proposed improvements.
Yep. So I guess preference to Dima to do the case studies now or after the Streamflow Tracker?
I think we could just take care of it now. It shouldn't take too long. I think this is the one that the question was about with September. So this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, let's see, who asked this?
DK, that was you.
Yep. So yeah, Dana, were you the one slated for this, or do you want me to take it?
Sure, I can take it. So this was last year, September 1st, 2021. We had this late season monsoon surge where PW at Grand Junction was at 1.1 inches, which is very, very high for this time of year as a daily max. And it was increasing even further south, which makes sense because you're moving towards the moisture source. There was some faster southwesterly steering flows. So there was some training that was possible, and training just means continuous storms filling in behind each one. So it kind of is this back building effect. But if you step through, you'll see that we had a moderate threat for the elevated plateaus, the San Juan Mountains, as well as the flat tops, which are a very problematic area for flash flooding onto the highway. And then if you flip through to what actually happened, not a lot happened. There was heavy cloud cover that day, which only allowed moderate instability to form. And this is kind of very similar to kind of what we saw the last couple weeks over the area. It's very, very sensitive to the amount of CAPE that you can get, which is instability, which builds when you don't have cloud cover. So there was not enough breaks in the cloud cover to initiate thunderstorms. So while the environment had all of the ingredients, it didn't quite have that instability to kick off thunderstorms. And we're finding that that's a very, very sensitive signal. So we're talking like 200 joules per kilograms of CAPE difference between having storms and not over this area. Sorry. And there's the severe thunderstorm warning or something for Denver right now as storms roll over. Anyway, so that was kind of that case study. Is that sufficient, or do you have any questions about it particularly? So in this case, this is what we call a false alarm.
Well, Dana, hopeful that that warning you just got may be a false alarm, so we'll see.
It's for the abs. They wanted there's lightning, so downtown Denver for the abs celebration to take shelter, everyone that's outside.
Good to know.
Sorry, guys, I am a mess today.
That's pretty funny. Well, thanks for going over that recap of the that case study, and I think that wrapped up our discussion. Additional coverage of that case study. Appreciate the thumbs up there, Dave, DK, for that. Thank you, and we will transition into the Streamflow Tracker.